The Norman invasion that began here in Bannow Bay in 1169 has sent shockwaves through Irish history for centuries. Diarmid MacMurrough, the deposed King of Leinster, assessed his options for reclaiming his title and looked to the Norman conquerors of nearby England and Wales. He invited them over to fight with him as mercenaries, but these Norman knights would soon become colonisers. Their goal was to take control of this land and transform the society, to implement a top-down European feudal system and cement their place on the landscape through a series of ambitious castle-building projects. Today, a truly unique project is delving deeper than ever before into the data left behind by these Normans at the site of their first fortified castle, Carrick.
I don't know of another site like this in the world. So, I mean, you have sites where they're doing experimental archaeology, you have sites where they're building replica buildings, you obviously have lots of archaeological sites, but I don't know of anywhere they're bringing it all together in live times.
When the Normans, led by Robert Fitzstephen, landed here at Bannow Bay, they marched on Wexford town and took it after only a short siege. They then chose a strategic site 4 kilometres south of Wexford town, on a natural high point over the narrowest crossing of the River Slaney. Over the last 4 years, the Irish Archaeology Field School has been developing a project here that picks up where an earlier dig left off in the mid-1980s. Like Diarmid MacMurrough before, they too have enlisted foreign aid.
The University of Missouri in Kansas City.
From the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts.
Yeah, Gettysburg College.
At Biola University.
Melbourne, Australia, and Harvard University.
From Arkansas in the United States, the University of West Georgia in Carrollton.
It's looking at a castle, because Carrick is a castle site, in the context of the wider medieval landscape around it. That we didn't look at it in isolation, so we also looked at the Deer Park, the Borough, whatever elements were available to study. We had an open-air museum and the Heritage Park involved. We have a community within Wexford, a heritage community that we've built up, international students, and we work with a number of universities. So it was just drawing very diverse people together, some of whom have only taken up archaeology literally that summer or that day. So I like the project for that reason. It's very diverse.
Carrick was the first site fortified by the Normans. They were setting out their intent that they were here to stay, and the establishment of castle sites was essential to their vision of securing this new colony.
The Anglo-Normans were constructing these enormous castles, partly for defensive reasons, but partly to demonstrate their presence, their arrival on the scene. And so they often chose places that had already been inhabited, that were already settlement sites, partly because they wanted, again, to demonstrate physically, we're here now and we're in charge, but also because those places were tried and tested places. They were strategic locations. They were places where markets or churches, ecclesiastical sites had been. They were crossing places on rivers. They were important sites that are still, to this very day, places where people congregate, either for religion or for trade and commerce.
So we're just leaving the ringwork now. Walking over the ditch, obviously, we've just gone through the bank. So the first thing you'll probably notice is that cutting 6 is quite some distance away from the site. And it's our first cutting outside of the ringwork, but still where we believe the limits of the medieval town would have been. We're expanding the project to start building the lost town of Carrick, and we want to dedicate it home, for want of a better word, for our experimental archaeology programme. We're going to be making authentic replicas of medieval features, and we'll know exactly where they are. So if archaeologists come back or future generations come back to the site, they'll know the features were constructed in this area and they won't confuse them with the real archaeology on the site.
If we define our sense of place and belonging today by all that have gone before us, it is essential that we have archaeologists delving deep into our historical data. The Carrick project is now taking that data and picking apart the sensory and human processes behind it.
I suppose for me, it's about understanding the technologies that are involved in that. It's not just looking at these two separate materials, but instead this lime represents a lime kiln. It represents all the fuel that was used in order to do that. It represents the acquisition of a stone that can be converted into lime, or seashells that can be converted into lime. And then everything, all the skill and knowledge to go along with that. And again, when we're talking about the Normans coming to Ireland, this isn't necessarily a technology that was in use beforehand. Maybe some glimmers of it, but it certainly takes off once the Normans came in.
Dr. Brendan O'Neill of UCD has partnered with the Irish Archaeological Field School at Carrick to deliver the next step of the project, to rebuild the Norman town that sprang up here around a newly established castle.
MJ O'Kelly, who was an archaeologist in and around the middle of the last century, and he ran lots of experiments with iron smelting, with fulloch fees, so fulloch fees for cooking. These came from his experiments, and then as well building houses, Neolithic houses, stuff like this. So there's it's got a good kind of history there.
Thanks to the Community Monuments Fund, the Carrick project can now move from digging the lost town to rebuilding it.
I suppose I should start by saying when we came in 18, we came in with a very clear agenda of what we wanted to do. And excavation-wise, it was just to finish out and understand the 1980s excavations and then progress with our own research agenda after that. And the 850th anniversary was huge. A conservation and management plan for the site was big. But the fourth big, if you like, aim, sort of aim of the project overall was how to maximise our location within an open-air museum. So we buddied up with Brendan and UCD, and we started small scale because we have to.
The open-air museum where the Carrick project is based is the Irish National Heritage Park, established in 1987 when a local group of historians convinced Wexford County Council to use land left over from a road widening project to establish the museum.
I think the Heritage Park is actually a good example of this, where before UCD, or it was in universities, we would go to the heritage parks or open air museums, we would work with people there or work on projects there. That was our space to run experiments, really.
Experimental archaeology brings with it a demand for attention to detail. Attention to the very materiality of the subject sets it apart as an ideal way to learn, demonstrate and understand our past.
When you try to explain some of the more complicated technical processes that are happening in a classroom, it really is left up to the individual how much they access that. But actually having to do it, having to make it, and also all of the theories, thoughts that go into the technology. So this is how I make a pot. That's great on paper, but when the end result has to be a pot, that's a very different investigation. And so I find
it's one thing to be able to look at a dig site, identify walls, identify stones, identify objects that were used every day. It's another thing to actually have to put that together, put in the sweat that it takes to carry those rocks, to build that wall, put in the time waiting to do those things, breaking up earth. I think it's really important to understand how much work it actually takes to do something.
Hands-on learning is a great way to do things, and something that we lose a lot of as we get older, right? You know, you're a kid and you have your art classes, but then you hit, later into your education, you stop doing that. I think that's a shame. I think we really should keep on doing these really hands-on activities where you succeed and fail together, and you really learn from that moment of being there, like in the dirt, as it were.
We would pick things from the site and then we'd try and recreate them with the students, and the experimental archaeologists would be showing the archaeologists what they'd done and vice versa. So we've gone from making a small furnace or making a pot or making a belt buckle to making our first structure. We put a smith's house on site and we're starting to build replica walls. So the project has gone up a gear, but we hope as the project progresses that the building will get bigger and bigger, inform more and more by what's happening from the excavation, and that people will get a sense of what Carrick was really like, without the diseases and the plagues and the wars maybe, but they'll get a sense of what Carrick was like on a day-to-day basis.
The future of the Carrick project will be motivated by the ideas behind experimental archaeology and will draw on the craft skills of locals.
Working on the land, my father was a small farmer, had a few acres, and we were always repairing dry laid walls and picking stones off the fields. It was woodland before he reclaimed it, so any type of woodland after being cleared, the stones would be coming up for years out of the ground. As like a saying goes, when you buy meat, you buy bones. When you buy land, you buy stones.
The work that Pat does, not only in trying to reconstruct stuff, but in trying to understand what is there on the ground initially, and pursuing the analysis and trying to understand how things go together and stuff like that. That's really kind of, it's the kind of experimental archaeology process really that he's come to in his own life and in his own work.
Parts of the fortification up there, it certainly is a hot lime mortar, there's no doubt about that. But I dug down about 2 years ago to see what kind of a material was on the site up there, because of Carrig being where it is up on that hill, if you can find something that's up there you can build with, it's certainly a benefit. So I found a subsoil that I dug up, looked at it, did some samples at home, and this is part of it here. I sent a sample off to be analysed, and the report came back that there were no inclusions of lime, charcoal, pozzolan or anything else in that mortar. It was just pure earth mortar.
What Pat Hickey was using when he identified the clay as the mortar on site, that's through geological processes too, and the Normans would have recognised that. Again, they're not interested in the geological processes, but understanding those geological processes allows us to go, okay, what were they doing? How do they understand the landscape? They had this innate understanding of what stone was good, like stonemasons do today. That's sort of lost to us, certainly lost to academics. But if you understand the geological processes, then that really helps you understand the site.
What we're mixing here is an earth mortar, a 6 to 8 millimeter grit, and a hot lime. So it's for the daub onto this building here. Brendan found something similar in Clonmacnoise, so that's what we're trying to replicate here. So again, it's experimental, but it looks the very same so far. It's looking good. The mortar is hot at the moment due to the hot lime, the lime being in it, as you would expect. The grit distribution is good. So about another 5 minutes we'll be finished with the mix, and then we're going to apply it to the wattle here behind me.
Nice underhand kind of thing, and then you just smooth it out.
The castle at Carrick is known as a ringwork castle. Even today, the large ditch dug around the site over 850 years ago is impressive. The round tower on the site today was built in the 19th century with the stone from the original Norman castle. The trades associated with castle building would have existed in Ireland, but the Normans brought their own skilled craft workers.
So they would have brought masons, which are kind of like engineers, I suppose. There would have been lots of different craftspeople coming with them. Some of them are menial tasks. You can delegate them out, right? But you still need to bring that knowledge with you, that knowledge base. And it's not just as simple as having a guy who kind of has seen a thing. These are really experienced, really knowledgeable craftspeople. But also up on the site, you find pottery, right? Really early pottery from the site. Again, some of this is imported, so you're getting material from France and from Britain, but some of this has been made locally as well. And so you'll need somebody not only who knows how to get clay and work clay, but these are glazed, how to make them glazes. These are fired. How do you fire something? How do you build a kiln? What are these things? And these are no small feats in themselves. And anybody who you know, to kind of contextualize that, anybody who wants to go out and build a kiln and see exactly how difficult that is, I encourage them to do it, because it in itself is its own craft.
While the Normans have left us a very physical reminder of their presence, culturally they have left a permanent mark on Wexford.
You know, in terms of the built heritage we've left, in terms of, you say, the surnames, in terms of our psyche, in terms of Forth and Bargy almost having their own dialect and being a world apart for a long time. So it is, it is absolutely an Anglo-Norman place.
The Normans set up here over 850 years ago. Then came the archaeologists, then the students, then experimental archaeologists. And introducing tradespeople gives a really vivid, exciting way to understand and tell the stories that are buried here.
I think as well, you get a lot of people who won't know the detail of that history, or might not even realise that was happening, particularly on the site of the Heritage Park, and bringing that into people's consciousness in these ways. It's so important for the local community. It forms part of their identity. It reinforces part of the identity and the uniqueness of that site as well, as such an early Norman settlement there, right in the middle.
What the students found out was these buildings, whether they're in Ireland or in the United States or wherever they are around the world, there's a lot goes on into putting those buildings together. So it's it gave them a good idea of the physicality involved and the site organisation.
This project is turning Carrick inside out, bringing it back from below ground so that we can step back into the past while learning about the future.
Why study archaeology? It's interesting. I really like the past and it's kind of fun, but it also has applications for what do we do next. We've got a massive data set behind us, which is the past, which is archaeology. So if we want to think about, well, how do we deal with climate change? We have a data set of human history where people have been interacting with changing climates and environments. So we can begin to look at them. How does that affect how they do things? How does that affect what they produce and how they live, their settlement patterns and stuff like that? And I think that it's somewhere like the Heritage Park is a great place to begin to talk about things like that movement of people, where we see it's not this homogenized Irish.
The Carrick project is setting standards for a type of blended learning and exposition that can redefine how we learn from the past and plan for the future.
If I had my time again, I probably would have been one of Brendan's students, you know. It wasn't really a thing when I went through college, certainly not in Ireland, is the experimental archaeology in the building. Because I don't know of many places, if any, in the world that's combining a live archaeological dig, an open air museum and the experimental archaeology together to tell a story. And that's what we're doing. We're just telling a story. So I really hope that takes traction and continues to develop.
Students and locals who work at the site are learning facts and stories, but they also go to bed at night feeling the effort and power that the Normans brought with them.
It's great working to uncover walls, but to actually build a wall, the physical effort going into building a wall, the amount of labour, the gathering of the stones, the finding of the mortar, the digging out of the ground of the materials, it's huge. It adds a whole new dimension to the power that someone would have to actually put up a fortification like that. And that's what it really says, that you need serious financial muscle to do this, and power, and it's just adds another dimension to the whole project.
Carrick Castle and the town that was established here lasted for over a century. Then a combination of factors led to its demise. These first Normans that came here regarded themselves as frontier warriors and were regarded with suspicion by the crown back in England. One of the first Normans, Maurice Fitzgerald, is reported as saying, "Just as we are English to the Irish, so we are Irish to the English." These first Normans regarded their landing in Wexford and the early battle victories as their own origin story, part of a European conquest that echoed through the ages. In 1571, 400 years after the invasion, an English historian recorded their poem that they still held dear. At the creek of Bag and Bun, Ireland was lost and won.